On this episode of Industry Relations, Rob and I talk about whether it's BPP 2.0 or MLSPP 1.0. Let's go. This is Industry Relations, a podcast that's at the intersection of real estate and technology from an insider's perspective, with Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson. Hey, everybody. I'm so happy to announce our newest sponsor, RentSpree. RentSpree is LA-based and is a provider of award-winning rental software that helps real estate agents, owners, and renters to simplify and automate the entire real estate rental process. From listing to lease, these guys have got it figured out. With nationwide coverage, RentSpree is an all-in-one platform, is known for its easy and secure interface and suite of rental tools, including tenant screening, rent payments, marketing, and renter management. To date, RentSpree has partnered with over 250 of the most influential MLSs, associations, and brokerages, and they have over 1 million users throughout the U.S. That's great. In fact, they just announced a deal with the Miami Association of Realtors. This brings their agent count in Florida to over 120,000 agents, with over 600,000 total in the U.S. that is able to access RentSpree through their MLS or association. RentSpree is ranked 625th on the latest Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list in 2022. Also, check out the show notes for rentspree.com. They just issued a white paper that talks about the opportunities that agents can have by incorporating rentals in their business model. I've written a lot about this. I think it's a great strategy. So please visit rentspree.com to download that white paper. Thank you, Michael, and the entire RentSpree team for sponsoring Industry Relations. Rob and I really do appreciate it. So go visit rentspree.com today.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Industry Relations. This is your co-host, the notorious Rob Hahn. And with me, as always, is my co-host, the fabulous Greg Robertson, right here.
Hola, Rob. How's it going?
Oh my God, you're low energy. I know. Yeah, I know. You're sick as a dog. I know. What's
I think today is the day I'm going to actually not try to take any medicine. I had a pretty good rest last night, but
good.
My voice, obviously, as people can hear, is a little bit still raspy.
It's kind of raspy, in a sexy way, though. You know.
Okay.
Maybe you should start smoking cigarettes. I'm just saying. You know.
Welcome to the quiet storm, everybody. Get ready. How about put some Barry White on?
All right. Could you actually do Barry White if you had to? Do you think? Because you're an amazing.
I've never done
singer.
Barry White in karaoke, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe the next time we get together, I'll do some Barry White for you.
Let's have that be soon. So travel season's winding down. I mean, I know there's the tech thing, the T360, and then there's NAR.
Yeah, that's going to be in Newport Beach, right? So I'll be there on Monday and Tuesday. Yeah.
I'll be there, not there, actually. I'm actually coming to town for the SP200 thing that I do every year with those guys. Yeah. So maybe I'll see you in person there, man. But NAR, are you going to NAR? Are you going to Orlando?
Yeah. I mean, I hope to be cured of this. I'm not contagious. It's just as hacking, this cough has been bothering me for the last 2 weeks. But no, I'm going to be at NAR. We're looking forward to that. Orlando.
And it's not it's just to be sure, it's not the coof, right? You're not contagious.
No. I got tested for that. This is actually, I had COVID, and this is way worse than COVID. So, yeah.
So, for our listeners, if you see Greg out and about, you have nothing to fear. It's just a random ass cough, not the dreaded bug.
No, I already got, they told me I wasn't contagious and all that stuff. I wouldn't do that to anybody for sure.
So we have a lot of topics that we could cover, but I thought, in our pre-show, we were just talking like what's the most interesting, and I thought we would talk about the Broker Public Portal 2.0.
Right, yeah.
So I don't know if you followed kind of what happened, what's been going on here, but I saw this was on, God, where was it? It was on Riz Media. There was a story that just came out where Broker Public Portal, I guess, has announced what their 2.0 version will be. Like, have you seen this story yet, or do you want me to just?
No, I mean, I've seen it. I actually have the RFI.
Yeah.
As part of Lone Wolf. So, and I've talked to Victor about it a little bit. Yeah. So
you have some inside knowledge.
But he didn't get back to me. But yeah.
So I'll just kind of look at what Riz Media said, right? And I've actually already gotten a couple of, notices or whatnot, if you will, from people on the inside as well, like, you as well. But basically what this story says is BPP 2.0 will be built on 3 pillars. Okay. Pillar number 1, national consumer platform created through technology reciprocity. I wrote a post, by the way. It's calling 7 questions, but it was probably more like 27 questions.
Sounds like you.
I know, right? But one was this idea of technology reciprocity. The second was national data set created through MLS reciprocity. And then national display rule set are the 3 pillars, right? So I had a bunch of questions as a result of it. And let me see if I can pull up my post on this. All right. So let's actually do that, since you actually are in receipt of RFIs or whatnot. And what is it like? What's going on with this technology reciprocity? Because that was the piece that I had real questions about.
Yeah, I have questions on it too, right? I mean, I did talk to Victor really early on, and I think actually since I've talked to him, since it was like the first probably few days that they announced that, it sounds like they've further articulated exactly what they're thinking, because reading the RFI, I still have those questions even after talking to Victor. I don't know. I mean, it's unfortunate for me, for us, I guess, is, you have a big company like Lone Wolf or any of the other ones, where our roadmap is built, right? We have, we've got resources planned for all the different products and companies we bought, and we have to go there. So while I would love to kind of participate in this, it's just not something realistic that we can do right now. So I haven't, I read it over once, maybe a second time. But I just, as much as I've talked to our leadership, it's just not something we can kind of participate in. So I really haven't dig deeper into the new questions. So, I mean, I know the past.
Yeah,
sure.
So maybe you can answer a couple of questions that, these were like question number 2 and 3. Question number 2 that I wrote was, in the press release, what they talked about is this building will be done, through said developments will be, quote, open sourced to BPP brokers, MLSs, and vendors, right? And the question that I had was, why is open source in quotes, right? Because you and I, that I'm like one of the biggest proponents of open source software in real estate. It's not
exactly open source as it is really technically known as, yeah.
So the RFI did not say, hey, if you participate in this, you have to open source your code, right?
No.
So what's the extent
I think you have to make it available. I think you have to have that it's accessible. I mean, like maybe have an open API or ways for people to kind of integrate with you, right? But I don't think as what open source is known as as open source, right? A lot of people, I think, hijack that term to mean that it's, we're going to be open to work with other developers or other
open platform.
Other companies.
Yeah. So the question there is, there's 2 flavors of open. There's open source, which is like you take your code, you put it in GitHub, and anyone in the world can go check it out.
Yeah.
The second is sort of a limited open source, where it's like you take your code, you put it into a repository, only certain people and companies can look at it. It doesn't sound like it's even that, right? It's just what? Like you have to provide APIs, you have to, do you know what I mean? Like you don't have to expose your code base, I guess is the point, right?
Yeah, again, these are questions mostly for probably, Victor or somebody else over there on the technical level. I think, again, they want to foster some sort of like happy place for brokers to go to. I think when it first, I mean, when I did some research and looked back at this thing, I think the model that everybody was pointing to was like Orbitz, right?
Okay.
Which was, as maybe people don't know on this, and I don't even know if that site's still up. Probably isn't.
I don't either. Right? But in fact, let me check right now. Let's see.
Yeah. So the model of Orbitz is like, it was all the airlines getting together and saying, hey, we don't want to go Expedia. We don't want to do anything like that. And we're going to put our own site together where all of the airlines, or most of the airlines, or the bigger ones, would contribute. And then we have our own site and we can control that. And I'm assuming we'll have open standards so that, if United wants to work with us, if American Airlines, that they can do that, and that they control the experience, and that there's no middle person coming into the money doing that, right? So, so when they first announced way back in 2015, that's the model they went to, where the broker public portal was going to be something of an Orbitz model that was an alternative to go other than Zillow and Realtor.com and the other aggregators. I guess back then it was Trulia and something else, right? So it seems maybe they're trying to go back to that, but also there's a component that you can, MLSs can use this technology as that they can maybe be a spoke off of the hub of that for their own MLS public facing sites, right? Too. So, maybe you could take that same technology, skin it to be, it's now the Pacoima MLS.com, right? Or, whatever they want to call it.
Right. You can clone it, as a story says.
Right. And then to me, I think this is a better way, not a better way, but another way of looking at this. So to me, that's the way that, if we look at the beginning, right? So it's appeared to be brokers wanted another way of controlling their data that could compete with Zillow. Right. So the model that everybody was writing about was like, oh, this could be an Orbitz.com play, right? Then very quickly after that, and I think brilliantly, and I think it was more of a marketing move, HomeSnap said, well, we've got a public-facing site. We've got a great mobile app. Why don't we partner with you? You don't have to build anything. We can work together here. What that did, it kind of gave HomeSnap their bona fides, as I like to call it, right? Where it's like, oh, well, these guys are blessed by the brokers.
That's right.
And HomeSnap just leveraged the shit out of that with MLSs. Right. So now, the broker, they have their brokers already that was part of that. All the brokers say to the other brokers, it became some sort of echo chamber. HomeSnap's the one. HomeSnap, we're going to beat Zillow with HomeSnap, blah, 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 right? MLSs all over the country should be adopting HomeSnap, blah, blah, blah. And that got some traction. Right. It didn't get some traction in some other places. It was, $1 per member per month, that kind of thing. There was a little bit of questions on the structure of that. I mean, I think I had Victor describe to me 4 times how that the BPP was saying, well, it's a joint entity with this and that, and well, no, and if this is, it was like some sort of Rube Goldberg, LLC or some shit, and then of course what we know happened after that is, and my question to Victor, I think if we look back at a podcast I did with Victor, was like, well, what if Zillow buys them or some other entity they want? Well, they have a say. Well, they didn't have a say. Most of the BPP board members that I know didn't hear it until after the transaction happened, right? So now CoStar gets it, and it seems after, I think either you or somebody else wrote, after a year of negotiating, couldn't come to some agreement, and now it doesn't appear that we don't know what CoStar is going to have happen, but it doesn't seem like, based upon their previous experiences, that they could. There is a possibility they could be a non-friendly to the industry, right? So now, and then there was, I heard there was a breakup fee. So now BPP finds itself flush with some cash, right? And they're like, okay, now, well, let's go. So now this is like, to me, it is interesting. It's like, I mean, does anybody care, right? I mean, is the notion, are they again going to go back to the original strategy? We need a site that is going to be a Zillow killer. I mean, we talked about this before. I mean, is that, using first principles, as we said before with CoStar, we decided, you and I both, that was not CoStar's intent, because that would be a land war in Asia, right? That they had to have another motivation, another thing they were hoping, another way of winning, right? Yeah. Which could go into another conversation we could have later. So it's just a little bit nebulous to me. Does it make sense for another HomeSnap type customer to come in and say, hey, we've got, could it be Movado? Let's say it's, I'm just trying to think of the ones that are left right now that have any case. Ojo Labs, right? They have that portal like, hey, well, we already have this built. I'm not sure if they have a mobile app or not, but let us be your next partner in this. Or does BPP think they're going to partner with a vendor that's going to build this for them? Well, so
that's the thing, man. That's not what it sounds like. So a couple of things. Number one, it is clear, at least from this news release, that they're going to have a national search site, right? And it says right here, the BPP will have a national search site and corresponding mobile app, which will also be licensed by BPP for, quote, cloning by MLS and brokers who wish to engage consumers directly. So I think the idea there seems to be BPP is going to develop this national website, like you said, like an Orbitz. And then all of the members, the MLS and the brokers, could just take that, white label it, right? And then have their own websites be this national, portal, right? So instead of being like one Orbitz, it's more like 2,000 Orbitzes.
Right.
I think that's kind of the idea. But the point I want to make about Orbitz, you're right. And I remember when BPP was first formed, right? And this idea was it's Orbitz, right? We need the industry to own the portal. We can't just let Zillow and Realtor.com and Redfin just kind of continue to dominate. And I remember at the time saying to the people that I was speaking to, who were kind of in the original, I was like, well, okay, so who's contributing money, right? It's like, well, everyone's contributing like whatever. It was like 5,000, 10,000, whatever it was to join.
Yeah, it was nothing.
This
it was
thing.
nothing.
And I was trying to
I think it was 500,000 and they said that the original kind of fund was
raised. Yeah. And what I was pointing out to is, look, when Orbitz launched, right? And I'll read this from Wikipedia. Orbitz was the airline industry's response to the rise of online travel agencies such as Expedia and Travelocity, as well as a solution to lower airline distribution costs. Continental, Delta, Northwest, and United, subsequently joined by American Airlines, so those 5 companies, invested a combined $145 million in 1999. Right, so it's $145 million in 1999 dollars, which is probably what, 300 million today, right?
At least.
And I remember thinking, like, okay, fine, if you're going to do this, it makes sense, like, do an Orbitz model. But the brokers like Realogy and Home Service and Kellaway, like, y'all need to put some real money into this thing, right? They never did, right? 500,000 is what, I mean, it pays for like staff and Victor, right? I mean, it's not going to pay for development of a true national portal, right? And they never did, which is why they then went with partner with whoever and ended up partnering with HomeSnap because they didn't want to do that, right? So I'm like, has that changed? So this sort of, and it doesn't feel like it has, right? So it's this technology reciprocity.
I think here's what we don't know, just to interrupt a bit. There was a breakup fee, right? Plus, I don't know if during that relationship, if BPP had been receiving any funds as part of that partnership. So they could be sitting on a pretty nice nest egg, more than, I mean, I don't know if it's 100 million, but I mean, I don't think it's the kind of money you and I know what it would take to launch a consumer portal. At that point,
so here's the thing. I happen to know what the breakup fee was, but I'm not going to talk about it because, But here's what I can say about the breakup fee. It wasn't big enough that Andy Florence had to talk about it in his earnings call.
Right.
Right. So it's not hundreds of millions.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Right.
What's the word they use? Not substantial, but
yeah. It wasn't a material impact.
Material, that's the word. Yes.
Right. So we know it was fairly small.
Okay.
Right. That's number one. Number two, if they had such a huge nest egg, right, then why are they talking about technology reciprocity? Why are they talking about open source? In other words, it's not like BPP then said, hey, we're going to launch BPP 2.0. We are talking to a bunch of vendors to supply this to us because we're sitting on a huge, war chest, and we're just going to buy it. Like, we're just going to pay Lone Wolf $50 million to develop this website for us. That's not the message, right? The message instead we got was, sort of this technology reciprocity, developer tools will enable BPP MLS brokers customize their consumer-facing blah, 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 make it their own. Any innovation developed by participants will be available to all MLS and brokers who wish to participate in technological reciprocity. And I'm like, that's one of the key things I sort of zoned in on. I was like, what is technological reciprocity? Right.
Well, you'd said before that there's something in there that said that they can clone part of it, right? So to me, the way I guess I would imagine it, and again, I don't have a dog in this hunt right now, right? As I talked about. So they hire a vendor to build this thing that meets this criteria. Listen, we want you to build this thing that in the future, knowing people can contribute, make it into something that can be maybe put on GitHub or, in a true open source thing. I don't really think so. Or they're going to have something that's a hybrid where they have a vendor build something and that vendor will also manage the site along with any changes people want to do or offshoot, right? I mean, I'll give you an example, right? So, I have some history back with eNeighborhoods, and we were the first guys to do Remax.com as a network of broker IDX sites, right? So this is very kind of familiar territory a little bit. Now, this is the first, you got to think back then where a lot of sites would just basically, they would iframe Realtor.com. A lot of brokers with iframe Realtor.com.
I remember.
There was nobody else. So because the IDX rules, what we had to do was we had to have basically a kind of a search handler portal that said Remax.com, and then anybody could type in an address, and then when you click search, that would do a search handler to say, oh, this is Newport Beach. This is our brokers in Newport Beach. Bring up this site, URL changes to match all the IDX stuff, but the same look and feel as the umbrella site, right? As that Remax.com site. So it appeared to the consumer, this is one streamlined experience, right?
Right.
And we call that a broker of IDX sites. And it was actually Andy Woolley that really spearheaded this whole thing with Remax and eNeighborhood. So he has that in his head. He knows exactly how that works. And then we were allowed to kind of upsell. Hey, if the broker wants their site to be upgraded, eNeighborhoods could sell them an upgraded theme package working together with them. If agents wanted a standard thing would have an agent profile page, but if an agent wanted to have their own agent website that was tied into that ecosystem, we could upsell the agent. And that's, to me, that feels a little bit more like what this is in a sense, where there's this platform and then other things can be added to it, right? And maybe some of those things are more self-serve than the vendor itself who created that platform of, doing upsells. But that's what it feels more like.
No, and if so, though, that's the thing. That's not reciprocity. Right. I guess I'm keying in on that word, right?
Okay. So let me talk about that. So I think what they're also trying to kind of hone in on is like, if they're getting all that data, right? If they get scale and they get all this data from the brokers, they can then become the national MLS grid or the national, trestle or they can create another place that is, again, controlled by the MLSs, even though some of those are already controlled by MLSs, right? That as serves an alternative to other vendors or MLSs to kind of do national partnerships or whatever, right? So that's when I read the that's what I think they're also trying to build at the same time would be another database of fucking listings, right?
No, they're trying to create the single national MLS reciprocity national database with a single national rule set, right? We're going to get to that in a second. Yeah. I guess the piece I'm wondering about, and again, maybe your insider knowledge, like the reciprocity piece, because this was my question. It's like, okay, reciprocity, IDX is kind of the model, right? The framework for the real estate industry to think about reciprocity. You get to display my listings, right? And I get to display yours, right? Thing is with IDX, as we know, and this is what I pointed out, a lot of times the firms, some brokers will contribute enormous amounts of listings and some brokers will contribute none because they don't have any listings, right? And yet people, the brokers who are providing the listings are willing to live with it because at the end of the day, some buyer shows up and buys my listing, I'm going to get paid. You know what I mean? So there's a benefit for me in providing my listings, even though I'm not getting an equivalent amount back, right?
Right.
With technology reciprocity, I don't think that works, right? In other words, so say Lone Wolf were part of this thing. Lone Wolf says, cool, here's 50% of the code base, right? And some startup comes in, no contribution to code base, but hey, thanks for this technology. We're going to now adopt it. And I'm like, that doesn't work, right? So unless it's true open source, if it's true open source, then no one owns it, right? Then it's like community ownership. And now whatever change you make, everybody gets to benefit and blah, 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 blah. But even in true open source projects, there are some key core developers, right, who contribute more than others, right? And their benefit from an open source perspective doing that is they now become experts, they now become really important, so they could end up getting hired by Google or Facebook or whatever. Right. I don't think that really applies in real estate, especially at the firm level.
There are examples within technology, and I'm going to get the name wrong, but maybe some of the developer listeners here know this, but I'm thinking it maybe was MongoDB or some other technology out there that was started as an open source project. Right. But then later on was then monetized.
Right.
So there's still this fork of open source, but then some technology companies have taken that, making that better, than monetize some of the features off that fork. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that's entirely a business model that hasn't been out there. I think it's done in different places where something starts and like, well, I build so much value on this thing, I'm going to pay. Yeah. I'm going to start charging for this, right? I don't know if that's going to work here. And let me go back a little bit to add a little thing that I remember from the RFI. One of the things they were talking about the reciprocity of data was that they were also going to include a fast pass for vendors to get that data, right?
Okay.
So that was kind of a carrot where it is a pain in the, I call it a scavenger hunt, right? Where for IDX data, we have to get a signature from the broker, a signature from the MLS, and it's just a manual process of people running around chasing each other. Yeah. And I've been advocating, and we had a panel on this in CMLS, and I know that there's an MLS Matters thing that had a panel where, hey, if you're a large enough broker and you adhere to these, or a large enough vendor and adhere to these standards, why are we playing this game, right? Yeah. Can I get a fast pass so I can help my broker customers out quicker? Yeah. So that was one of the things they were adding to that. Yeah. As a thing there. So I just wanted to add that too. Yeah. So let's move to the data. I mean, it was just a thing about, so this is the piece that I really honed in. I'm like, what the, I don't get this, right? So national data set created through MLS reciprocity. Right. Not broker, MLS. So the idea is, well, that's where they would get their data from, right? I mean, right. So MLS will contribute data, right, to Broker Public Portal, this national MLS data set. It will be held in trust, by the BPP for the benefit of the BPP owners, which raised the question, like, who are the owners of BPP? I don't actually know. Do you know? No. Okay, so we don't know who those are. But here's the key piece, right? MLS will, no. The key piece was this. Where is it? I'm looking for it. Local consumer. So each MLS reciprocity allows MLSs to display the national data set on their local consumer-facing portal, right? So to your point, Podunk MLS can now display the entire country, right? Okay, but if all those policies work out, if they wanted to, then again, because the cloning, right? Like I don't have to develop a website; I could just clone the BPP website as podunkmls.com and then display the entire country, right? Okay, here's the piece that I was like, what? Last but not least, the national data set will only be for use by MLSs seeking to complement broker IDX search with a your listing, your lead search experience. Brokers will have access to listings from MLS where they are participant in good standing. In other words, this national data set is not available to brokers. And I'm looking at this going, WTF? Like, does that make sense to you? Well, let's walk that through. So they're saying if the MLS themselves work out an agreement where they allow displaying on this national site, commingling in a sense, right? In a sense. Not commingling as app, but data sharing or whatever you want to call it, right? It's data pooling. In other words, the MLS contribute their data to this common data set. Yeah. And in exchange, they would get the right, just like IDX, right, to display all of the listings in this national database. Yeah. But brokers can't do that. Right. So Zillow Killer, so let's call it ZillowKiller.com, right? So they build ZillowKiller.com. All the MLSs, the MLS agree through their brokers say, please, we want you guys to participate. BPPs are, ZillowKiller.com is our future. That's just simply not true, Greg. That's not going to happen. Well, that's what they're saying, though. Who's saying that? Well, that's if in order for this to work. Right. The MLS board of directors will say, vote yes, join Broker Public Portal.
right?
Well, the MLS board of directors are usually brokers, right? So, well, no, hold on a second. What happened with HomeSnap?
Oh,
I mean, a lot of the brokers, really lobbied their MLSs to sign up for HomeSnap, to sign up for all that, because it was going to help. It was the brokers. It was the way the brokers could combat all the other listing portals, right? So I'm thinking they're going to go by the same playbook and say,
no, but I'm
again,
saying no, fine, I get it, but factually speaking, right? Most MLSs,
we're not talking. This is all fucking fairy tale land. I mean, we're both in fairy tale land here, but I mean, this is how it would work.
I'm saying, Greg, factually, the boards of directors of MLSs are made up by associations.
Right.
Realtor
But not in all cases, right? I mean, CRMLS has a board of directors. I mean, in some cases it's different, but again, the brokers have, right? But brokers do have influence, with their MLS. Okay. Like, again, that's how they built HomeSnap, right? The influence from those brokers was put upon the MLSs to participate in HomeSnap. That's how that got going.
Okay, maybe. Like I said, I feel like the origins of Broker Public Portal and where it is now are totally different things. I think the origins were, like you said, sort of a Broker Public Portal. The broker just wanted, and it would the original Broker Public Portal was a direct outgrowth of that Realty Alliance, you have 10 days speech, right? Where the brokerages, the largest brokers, went to the MLS and said, "You're the problem, and if you don't fix it, we're going to do drastic things," right? And one of the outflows of that was the Broker Public Portal, where the broker said, "We're going to create the Zillow killer." And some MLSs said, "Yes, we'll help you do that," right? What I'm suggesting is this latest thing clearly says to me that has completely flipped, right?
Well, hold on. So let me just push back here a bit, right? So I don't think it's so crazy that if they build ZillowKiller.com, and that they're getting they're getting data from all the MLSs.
Yep.
And the MLSs, part of that data license is saying, okay, you can display. We agree to put this on Zillow.com, right?
ZillowKiller.com.
ZillowKiller.com.
Right.
And then you're saying, well, if they can be put on ZillowKiller.com, why can't a local broker in Pacoima put it on their site, right?
Right.
I don't know if that's like unusual. I don't know if that's a big, like, what the hell's going on here. I mean, those are two vastly different things. There's,
why are they different?
It could be considered kind of a syndication deal, right? I mean, it's syndicated on ZillowKiller.com, but it's not really it's not really that the Pacoima MLS.
Yeah, the Pacoima thing to me is a distraction. The real question is this, right? Pacoima MLS now has access to this national data set with a single national display rule set.
When you say access, everybody has access to that data.
No,
I mean, no.
That's my point. Brokers do not.
Well, I'm not talking about back-end access. I mean, anybody could go to ZillowKiller.com, right?
Sure, but you can say the same thing about Pacoima MLS, right? Why do they get to set up their own website that has the entire country, right?
Look at Zillow.com, right?
Sure.
I mean, everybody contributes to that as an IDX site, and but a local broker can't put all those things on his site. What's the difference?
I get it. Yeah, but here's the thing: Zillow's not then able to take their listings and then give it to somebody else. Right, BPP 2.0, this national data set specifically is designed. All MLS contribute their data, and all participating MLS can use that data and display it on their local website. Right?
Well, no, I think it's more of they can use the platform technology to build their own site.
No,
and then whatever data they have access to, they can display it on that site.
MLS reciprocity follows the same mantra of you can display my listings if I can display yours. MLS who participate in the Broker Public Portal will have their listings displayed on the new BPP national website, ZillowKiller.com, and will be able to display a national data set on their local consumer-facing portals, PacoimaMLS.com.
Okay.
It's IDX. It's MLS IDX. My question is, if I'm EXP, if I'm Remax, if I'm Keller Williams, if I'm Realogy, I still have to go through 150 local MLS IDX feeds. I don't get to use this national data set.
Right.
but the local MLS with 200 members can. And I'm like, who came up? And you're like, what?
Right. Okay. I see what you're saying, because I was missing that second layer that from what you're reading, the local MLS site can show the same amount of listings.
Right.
I didn't think that was the case.
Yeah.
I did not think that was the same. I thought it was that the only thing that can show all the listings would be that national portal, that's ZillowKiller.com.
No, that's what I'm saying. So, and by cloning this local Pacoima.com, MLS.com, doesn't even have to go build their own website. They could just clone the national ZillowKiller.com, right? And then launch their local MLS that is effectively a mirror, a duplicate of this national ZillowKiller.com, which is fantastic for the local MLS. I'm not that makes a ton of sense. That's fantastic. And anyone who's not HAR is probably going to want that.
I don't know about that. I mean, I used to sell MLS portals to MLSs, and it's not a slam dunk, even if it has more data on there. I'm telling you that right now, Rob.
Sure. But what I mean is, if you want to have a national portal, then you don't have to go spend a bunch of money. You don't have to blah, blah, blah. You just clone ZillowKiller.com, right? My thing is, but the brokers are shut out of this, and we're still calling this entity the Broker Public Portal, right? So, one of my thoughts is isn't it high time that we call this the MLS Public Portal? Because it's clear to me who's in charge now.
Well,
right?
Yeah, but let's go back. Let's roll back this, right? So, if they follow your leads, and somebody goes to ZillowKiller.com and they click on a Windermere listing. That lead is going to go directly to that Windermere agent, right?
That's right.
Okay. Same thing if it goes to the MLS portal. Where's that lead going to?
To Windermere agent. That's right.
Yeah, right. So there is some value, right, of this setup directly to brokers who contribute more. Okay. They have more listings. They're going to have more agents. They're going to get more leads, right? If you break it down to now the brokers can't do it on their site. I mean, from a local, let's talk about that. I mean, so that'd be kind of a complicated thing to happen. Like a broker launches a site locally, it has listings nationally.
Yep.
They're not, I mean, that person nationally is going to be, let's say I'm here and this has happened. And let's say the broker has all the national data on site, and I go to firstteam.com, popular brokerage here, and all the listings in the United States are on there. When I click that site, I don't know if brokers would want to even implement this, dude, right? Because when I click it, it's going to go, that listing's going to go to that. Let's say I'm looking for a house in Seattle. Well, the Windermere agent's going to get that listing, and it's nothing to do with me, right? If I'm a broker locally in my market, I want to use IDX the traditional way. Mm-hmm. I just want a broker IDX site because it's going to serve me as a lead generation for buyers in my market. I don't know if I'd want to participate in a your listing, your lead type of structure locally. I mean, it helps me nationally because, again, I've got more listings and they come to me, but locally, hell no, man. Actually, I don't want to. Why would any broker want to implement a your listing, your lead website? I mean, they want to implement IDX is really intended for.
I don't know. That's the brokers who came up with your listing. Hold on a second. It was the brokers who came up with your listing, your lead, right?
Right, but again, that's on a national basis, right?
I don't say so. Your listing lead, your lead doesn't apply on the local basis.
Well, they already get that. They already get that. They already get that.
Fair display guidelines applies to any website, local or otherwise, that abides by it, right?
Well, but if a broker implements, a traditional IDX site on their thing, anybody that clicks on their listing is going to come to them.
That is true.
Right? Already automatic.
Which is
any other listings.
Hold on. Which is a violation of fair display guidelines. Let's be clear about that.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, sure.
Cool. Continue. Yeah.
Okay. But they're going to get your listing, your leads because it's their brokerage, but also they're going to get the advantage of getting more leads because you're using it as a lead capture site because they spent money doing that. Sure. I mean, they've done SEO, they've done good design, they've done lead capture pages, all the things that make those kind of things, so that locally they can take advantage of that. What is traditionally, I don't think it's really a bad thing for a brokerage to have a national listings policy and a local listings policy.
Okay.
Right. I don't.
It would be nice if it would sure be nice then for the brokers to have the option.
Well, again, I think if a broker wants to tell their website vendor, I want to implement fair guidelines on my local broker IDX site.
No,
they can do that.
I want to have a national website where I have access to the entire national data set.
Okay, so so you're saying it would be great if BPP would give the brokers
the same
ability to use that feed, but then strictly saying they would have to be a you're listing your lead type of strategy.
For that
I think that
data.
broker would be a fucking idiot for doing that locally.
Why?
Again, they're not going to be able to use that as a lead capture for all the other listings.
Yes, of course, that's number one. But the second part is then it makes all the sense in the world to say brokers can use this and they don't have to. You know, this rule is not some federal legislation.
If you're using this, you have to say you're listing
I understand.
your lead.
My point is the broker public portal made these rules. Right. This is not a legislative rule. This is not some regulatory rule. So it seems very possible the broker public portal 2.0 could have done the following. Hey, MLSs, when you take this national data set, you have to abide by your listing your lead. Hey, brokers, when you take this national data set, you don't.
Yeah. I mean, they could. They could have. Sure.
And they didn't.
Right.
What that says to me is brokers are not in charge.
Yeah, I don't. Again, the leadership, the organizational structure of BPP, I've no.
They have like 13, 10 out of 13 governors are brokers. But it seems to me they're not in charge.
And again, let me push back a little bit. I think even if they gave that ability, it could be a moot point. Like, I'm not doing that. I mean,
okay, fine, but that's up to the broker's option.
99.9% of brokers would say, yeah, that's stupid. I'm not doing that.
I completely disagree, and here's why, right? Because think about what you just told me on this podcast about the permissioning process. Like, as a vendor.
Please don't beat me up with my own words. I hate it when that happens.
I'm going to beat you with your words because you talked about FastPass, right? As a vendor. If I'm EXP, why do I not want the same thing? I'm EXP. I'm a national brokerage, right?
Yeah.
Why do I not want the same thing? I don't want to have to deal with 150 different rule sets from 150 different local MLSs. I would prefer to deal with one for the national display rule set.
Because if I'm EXP and if you're saying that I can get this data for, it's a much more easier data, but I have to implement your listing your lead. I think that's a devil's bargain there.
Broker Public Portal 2.0 could very easily have said, here's what we're going to do. MLSs, you can use this national data set, but you have to abide by you listing your lead. Hey, brokers, you can use this national data set, and you don't. Treat it just like IDX.
I get that. Sure, they could.
Done that, and they didn't.
But isn't like the whole – you're talking about a house of cards here because the premise – right, of BPP, the whole thing about this, the national, whatever it is that concept. So if they gear off of that, it's like saying, well, we're just everybody fucking else, right? So what really are we doing here, right?
Well, I don't understand. What do you mean?
So, well, if they're just going to be like another IDX vendor, be another fucking IDX vendor. Right, all you're doing here is like an IDX vendor that has other rules of like, well, you can do it here, but you can't do it here.
Oh my God, Greg, you're telling me allowing a national brokerage to have to deal with one rule set is not a value?
It's not a value locally, right? If they have to implement your listing your lead, it's not a value.
No, you keep going back to that. Forget your listing. BPP could have been one national data set, one rule set, right? Local broker or national broker, you only have to abide by this one rule set. You're telling me that's not a value? It's enormous value. Even small local brokerages oftentimes join 2 or 3 different MLSs.
Okay, if you're taking the local broker website out of the equation, is that what you're saying?
So the local broker website has to join 4 or 5 different local MLSs and have to abide by 4 or 5 different IDX rules, 4 or 5 different permissionings. You're telling me for that local, right?
Right. Okay, but in this scenario, they would have to implement your listing your lead to enable to get that data.
You keep going back. I'm saying dude, imagine the scenario where brokers are in charge. So they say if a broker uses national data set, they don't have to apply your listing your lead. Locally. They just use it like national IDX.
Okay, well, I mean, you're talking... Yeah, okay, they didn't do that, right? But
correct.
I'm saying is that if they did do that, right?
Right.
Then the whole premise of BPP, which I think was built on your listing your lead, just blows up. This is just now.
No, that's
just
not
another.
True. That is simply not true, Greg. Here's why. Because you could implement your listing your lead at the killzillow.com and at the local MLS level. Right. It's their own rules. They could have said, and you know what? This does not apply to brokers.
Right. Okay, so I get you. I just don't. I mean, to me, when I think of BPP, I think this fair display requirements. You're now saying this is a huge pivot for them to say only sometimes.
Ginormous. Here's the thing: your listing, your lead, the fair display guidelines made sense if the only thing that BPP does is a national website, one national website, right? Now you're going to say, now you can replicate this across every MLS as a member, but as a broker, you have to continue to deal with whatever 150 different MLS rules. Fine. What that says to me is this is no longer BPP, it's MPP. Okay? It is now MLSPP, not BPP. And that's the point I keep making. You're like, well, brokers wouldn't want to do that. I'm like, well, fine, but you know what? Judging by the evidence of what we're seeing, the policies that have created the schema, I mean, I'm like, in what way are the brokers in charge of this entity?
Yeah, again, leadership we don't know about or the structure of that. So, okay.
We can only look at the result, right? We can only look at the policies they've come out with, the plans they've come out with. And I'm like, we should just start calling it MPP.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
that's so kind of my point behind this.
Right. Okay. I see where you're going again. It's not BPP. Then it's something completely different.
Right, it
could be. Right. It could be P.
Which is fine. There's some value to that for the MLSs to do. I mean, this makes a ton of sense if I'm an MLS.
I don't think
or maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
The MLSs have other sources they're already working with other places. They can implement this already with the data aggregators out there.
The thing so there are two things though about that I'm curious about, right? And again, because you're enough of an insider, you understand how this works. And I guess we got to wrap up because we're kind of getting there.
Yeah.
So let's leave with these two questions. Question number one: this national MLS data rule set, right? In your judgment, because this was one of my questions, doesn't this make all of the MLS data sharing arrangements moot? Right. So the example I gave was Atlanta, FMLS in Atlanta, and RE Colorado and Denver recently executed a data sharing agreement. Right. And you and I both know MLSs all across the country constantly do these data sharing agreements. If you have VP 2.0, does anybody do data sharing agreements? Well, again, all you have to do is join BPP.
Yeah, but there's two different things. You're talking about public display versus within the MLS systems themselves.
Okay.
Right? So I don't know if BPP is talking about now you can put all that data in your MLS system and people can search on it. I think this is just a public facing thing. So I think those are two separate things.
What do you think is in the data sharing data that's not in the public display data?
Showing instructions. I mean,
right.
I don't know. I mean, normal agent only kind of things. I'm sure every MLS doing this kind of thing with data shares got completely different things, but there's probably public facing and non-public facing. Then there's always things like that.
But is that so? When you think about Atlanta, Denver, are showing instructions relevant?
Well,
I'm an agent in Denver, right? I go into the MLS, I look up a listing in Atlanta, it has showing instructions. Well, do I give a crap? Because I'm not going to show that house right in Atlanta. It's just not going to happen. So, what's relevant?
You should be aware of that. I mean, if an agent calls up and like, "Hey, I can't find the thing," and like, "Oh, didn't you read the showing instructions? Here's what it says." I mean, I don't think it's irrelevant. I mean, there's. I'm only thinking that as one example. I'm sure there's other examples I'm not thinking of that would make it.
So you know what? Let's do this.
Good to have that.
If you're a listener and you heard this, I would be curious to know what is in the private remarks, if you will, right? That would be relevant to an agent in Denver when they're pulling up a property in Atlanta in their local MLS system, right? Because that's the whole point of data sharing. A subscriber in Denver could go in and look at properties in Atlanta. How is that different than the national display thing, where you have all the photos, you have all the data, right, for display? Like, what more would you need? That's the question I've got.
Okay, but here's, we can ask ourselves that question right now. There's Zillow. If anybody could go to Zillow and look at any property right now, why the hell are they sharing data? Right?
What do you mean?
Well, okay, you're saying if this happens and there's a site that has all the listing data around the country, which is happening now, happens with Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, then the data sharing goes away. Why isn't data sharing going away right now?
That's an excellent question. I don't know why MLS do data sharing at all, but this is a next level because the Zillows of the world don't apply. It's still IDX rules, right? So the fields that you get are limited, right? So maybe that's the case. Maybe this MLS national data set is a limited data set.
Yeah,
maybe.
Probably.
I don't know. All right. So question number 2, though. Like I said, I just want to hear from our listeners if they have thoughts. Like, what's in the private remark? Like, what would be the advantage of data sharing if BPP 2.0 launches this national data rule set, right? Question 2 is, because we spent so much time talking about your listing, your lead. In your judgment, what would be the difference, right, for whether it's consumers or brokers or agents between BPP 2.0, ZillowKiller.com, and Homes.com?
Yeah, I mean, it's
right, because it's your listing, your lead on both sites. Like, what's the difference?
It's again about control. Whatever. Again, I don't. It's such a weird concept of that. Again, we talked about this with even Homes.com. If your premise is I'm going to beat Zillow, go back to the drawing board, and you've said that can't be Homes.com's main value proposition. There's something that Andy's in his head, Andy Florence is thinking of else. And so to me, is this just, BPP is a way for brokers to feel good about themselves? Well, we have our site too. I don't know. It doesn't, I mean, I don't know.
That's another question to our audience. You know what? What is the difference in your mind, listener, right, or watcher on YouTube? What is the difference between BPP 2.0, ZillowKiller.com, and Homes.com?
Yeah.
Because Greg and I can't really come up with one, so maybe you can. Help us out. Help everybody else out. All right. Cool, man. Well, with that said...
Lord, how was that? That was quick and you were... my brain's hurt from trying to kind of figure all this shit out.
I've heard from people, it's amazing how you and I could take a completely boring, minuscule, who gives a shit little detail and then argue for an hour.
I was actually talking to another person the same way. It was like, they were talking about how many hits do you get and how many whatever. I'm like, well, we don't really look at it that way. This is so niche and so inside baseball, but we know that people that are in charge of a lot of agents or that have a lot of influence in this organized real estate do listen. So I look at it that quality over quantity, but I think they appreciate this deep dive that we do because I think we, and I mean, just from this conversation, as I always do, I learn a lot from you just by having the conversation. I think it's good for anybody else to consume this way because it's and hopefully we do it in an entertaining way.
Hopefully,
that they can learn from it. But it is. I'm merely.
I'm just saying, man, we nerd out over the most picayune. Nobody gives a shit little detail.
I know. I care. I mean, I'm into it. Shit.
I care because we're insiders. All right. Hey, great to see you as always. I think we're gonna roll into recording another episode shortly. So. But thanks to everyone for joining us for this one, where we just kind of went all out on BPP 2.0. Really appreciate you.
Thanks.
Later.